Alright. Just the one package. Oops. I try to keep it attached so I can throw it all out together, but oh well. So let's see. Let's find the other one, because on the top here we have Boruto, set who knows what number. Oh, excuse me. I wasn't expecting to have to. But anyways, take a peek on the inside just to see what's different on the DVD and Blu-ray versions. Oh, those are actual people on there, okay. Could not quite tell. That yellow is very hard to make out. Oh, interesting architecture on the inside. On the Blu-ray version we have this. This looks like a poster version of the front cover. Which it is. An okay size. Perhaps something some of y'all might want. Do you think it was that way? Before we put it back in, I see that the inside art here is different. The disc arts are the same. But instead of architecture, it's people on the inside. On the Blu-ray. Very intriguing. Obey me. One master to rule them all. This looks like a bunch of guys, I think. Damn devious and devilishly handsome. A Otome mobile game that does sound alright. Regions A and B. This one, Japanese with English subtitles only. So, if you're hoping for an English dub, well, you don't get that for this one. At least not here on Blu-ray. Oh my god, this plastic is being really annoying. Okay. And, you know, different on the inside cover, that's always nice. Was the back different? It's interesting, because this doesn't feel very red. This feels very red and matches the back. Huh. "12 episodes on the one disc." And those are our guys, looking awfully trendy. Interesting. Next up we have Himouto Umaru-Chan-R, which I think is the second season. I think I mentioned before I didn't enjoy the first season, or at least the parts of the first season I started watching. The titular character is a little... didn't like it. Mostly, I guess I would say it's just not my form of humor. But yeah, Regions A... well, let me see, that was Region A, and it's English dubbed. Here it is. Nice and straightforward. Yeah, okay, there was no slipcover there. And then last but not least, we have Platinum End. From the creators of Death Note comes another mind-bending question. Just how far would you go to become God? Oh, interesting. Down there it's Regions A and B. Okay. This definitely gives a more Death Note vibe, doesn't it? Well, I guess I'm curious. I'm trying to remember if I've heard the name of this one or not. Clearly it hasn't taken the anime world by storm like Death Note did, but, you know. Probably still room for people exploring interesting ideas there. So, I'm curious. Alright. These are 2 discs. The inside, you know, mostly a bunch of angelic-ish feathers. Alright. And I know only one of these was DVD, but here's this week's anime DVD collection update. Alright, I guess this is going to be another long section. Y'all probably already know, because I don't know going into this if this is going to be another 1 hour long video like last week's. I'm glad I made the call to process the last week's one when I did. But there's a good chance of that because the lists, it's maybe actually 1 item bigger. Like a couple of things that I had completely watched are off, but there's a couple more things that came back in. Okay, so to get started, My Hero Academia Season 6, Episode 125. After the previous episode, which was an absolute holy shit episode, this one is definitely kind of, it feels like another in-between moment where I think there's one more episode in this season, or at least this core of this season, and so feels like it's just about to do that. Because otherwise, it was mostly an okay episode. Not necessarily bad by My Hero Academia standards, but definitely, given all the other awesome stuff that's been happening in Season 6, not the most awesome, but that's a very high bar. So, take with that if you will. So since with my Friday friend, he finally caught up with Rising of the Shield Hero, we identified the next thing, and that's he never watched ReZero Season 2. I have. So, we started that, and we watched episodes 26 to 30. I'm trying to remember what all I had to say about the second season the first time. Some of my thoughts this time. One of my problems with ReZero in general has definitely been, it feels like it does with the main character, I guess, stuff. So, like, he had, in Season 1, he expressed some self-loathing that I felt didn't make sense. Because we've been tantamount to his internal thoughts, his way of trying to do things, and he's been a breath of fresh air. And at the same time, while I do agree that the self-loathing sort of stuff is a worthwhile thing, it felt out of place. And actually, thinking about it, it feels out of place given what happens in Season 2 as well, given that it kind of establishes more about, I guess, his life prior to Jumping Worlds. And some of his attitude changes are weird. But overall, one of the things that ReZero does really well is it feels like there's something about it that definitely feels a little, I don't know, otherworldly, things beyond comprehension, something like that. I'm not sure how to place it, but it's a strong feeling that this show has that continues really well in Season 2 as well. At least the parts that we rewatched, and remembering some of the other stuff that happened, I suspect there's some elements of Season 2 that I remember being kind of frustrated with, but I don't remember if it was anything as bad as the first season, so this rewatch is good. Log Horizon, I finished Season 1, that's episodes 23 to 25, and then I'm 8 episodes into Season 2.
which actually I think I'm going pretty slow compared to last week, but I don't know. I felt like I just didn't have as much energy, which might not seem like it given all the stuff I've watched, but I don't know. It's felt tiring, but some of these shows are just definitely worth continuing to see. But I say all that. I don't know. I have more thoughts on why Log Horizon as a series is good, but not really synchronizing as well with me. And I don't know if I can talk about those in a whole lot of detail. But it's stuff that happens and stuff that's okay and I suppose interesting. But if I were to try and come up with a high level, I'm not really sure. I think maybe the problem with Log Horizon as a series, at least leading up to this point, is I don't know that there's a clear idea of a goal to see our characters work towards. And I feel like this is kind of slightly in line with some of the just overall issues where I feel like sometimes this show feels like it's smarter than I think it may actually be, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad or unwatchable. And there's probably a lot of shows that I've enjoyed that are like that, and I guess this one just happens to be either rubbing some of the buttons the wrong way, or I think the real problem with it is just that it's not grabbing me as much, and I think it is because of some of these things. Not that it's like the only series bad that way, but it's just an example. Let's see, To Your Eternity, Season 2, Episode 10, continuing to build up the interesting stuff that Season 2 has been doing up until now. Definitely interesting and thought-provoking stuff. I am curious where it goes from here. Some of y'all probably know because I'm definitely watching that one dubbed, so I'm a couple episodes behind latest episodes, but it's continuing to be a good series. Now we get into the long list of stuff that's absolutely new. So, Nijin Fushin Adventurers Who Don't Believe in Humanity Will Save the World. I would say that Episode 2, if there's anything about Episode 2 that's not good, it would probably be that it feels like it about the same level as the previous episode, insofar as I don't know. This one is supposed to be about adventurers who don't believe in humanity, but while there's dark connotations to that, and again, the first episode kind of introduced these dark ideas and tried to indicate it's staying somewhat lighthearted, I can't help but feel like it feels like it's contradicting, like these people aren't as not believing in humanity sorts of people. Like, I don't know. I'm thinking of something from another anime whose name I'm actually forgetting, but it's still an important, notable one. Y'all could probably figure it out if I talked about it, but I think what I would be saying might be spoiler for that show, so I don't want to say this comparison. Just to say that, for this one, it's hard to say. It's interesting. I think we did get more insight. Like I mentioned last time, we kind of knew for certain that two characters were spectacular in those ways, and now I think we learned a bit more about the other two characters. The part dragon girl, I'd say actually showed some really cute side this time. But I'm not sure if I completely understood the negative thing that happened to her last time. I got the impression it was deliberately saying this is darker than we want to say, but I think it maybe wasn't quite that. But otherwise, I guess it's moving forward in an okay direction. Maybe not anything that I would say is demonstrating that it's the most mind-boggling starting this season. But, well, whatever. We'll see what the next one is. The Magical Revolution of the Reincarnated Princess and the Genius Young Lady, Episode 2. This one actually continues to be quite hilarious. I like our main character. She's hilarious to watch. And it's quite interesting because, this is another one where it's like, oh, yeah, her dad ended up hitting her on the head. It's like, And it made me wonder, sometimes I don't like it when it's like, oh, somebody's hurting the main character. And I know one element of that has always been, if they're going out of the way to show the person as being, the comedy's supposed to be how much it hurts or something like that, then I'm like, I'm not sure why I would find that funny. And this one, it's not really about how much it hurts. It hurts, but I think it's interesting because there's less focus on it. So it's interesting, a meta thought that I am now commenting about. It kind of makes it more pronounced than it actually is in the show itself, because the entire point of the matter is less that, oh, she was in pain, ha ha ha, she got punched, and more just like, oh my god, she's really saying that, what an idiot. And not thinking that she deserves to be hit, but she's definitely telling the wrong person in order to not be hit. And liking what she did and not finding it frustrating, and it's just sort of like, she seems to know the right moment to say the wrong thing. And she's just fun. Now, that said, the interaction with the genius lady, I'm not entirely sure as much. This episode seemed to be a holdover episode for setting up maybe what it's going to be doing long term. I'm not entirely sure. But I couldn't help but remember watching episode 2, like, yeah, that main character has a pretty funny personality. Let's see, next up, The Ice Blade Sorcerer Shall Rule the World, episode 2. I think one thing I didn't mention last week is one of the interesting things here is there's a very interesting spread of personalities in there. And I'm not quite sure if they all mesh and make sense. I'm not sure that the show is trying to make them mesh and make sense per se. I guess some relatively interesting things happen in there. It feels like there's something amiss here, but it feels like it also has some pretty good action and setup sort of stuff going on. So, hard to say for this one what exactly I feel about it, but yeah, it's doing okay. Next up, chilling in my 30s after getting fired from the Demon King's army. So one thing episode 2 kind of answered that episode 1 sort of left in the air without actually mentioning it. It was, okay, if our main character was supposedly magicless and an all Demon King army that uses magic, then what was he doing? Because it kind of established that he hadn't been using actual weapons because he didn't start using them until episode 1. So then, episode 2 answered some of that, but it kind of feels like some of the personalities are just sort of there. It doesn't feel like the world is entirely off or wrong or something. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that right, but to me it kind of feels like I don't know, I guess it just sets up some of these personalities just to kind of have them there and not like it felt like they dynamically evolved per se. So, for example, it does establish that the current Demon King just has an irrational hatred for our main character for some reason. And I understand that on the one hand you want to keep things kind of making kind of a mystery for us to find out, but at the same time, I don't know. At the same time, if you don't give us something to kind of follow, then it just sort of feels convenient. Oh, yeah, well, the guy hated him. We have some ideas on why, but everybody else went with this. Why is everybody else continuing to go with this? I feel like the most natural thing to start happening here would be for the four generals to just kind of start losing faith and just kind of going off and doing their own thing. Like, that feels like the most realistic response, but I don't know that it's going to be doing that. It's hard to tell. And at the same time, I guess our main character's gotten lucky and just run into a couple of strong monsters at the right time. It's a little convenient. Maybe not entirely too bad. And the girl who likes him, although is secretly actually strong enough to probably defend herself if she wasn't so against combat or something like that. She feels very conveniently constructed. It's not the worst. It probably sounds worse me describing it all this way, but I'm still kind of waiting to see what it's planning to do, because it did play up on what it did in episode 1 in a pretty good way, so I'm definitely curious where it's going to go from there. But, yeah, we're here. Meanwhile, reincarnation of the strongest exorcist in another world. I would say it's set up for episode 3 really well. I'm definitely looking forward to episode 3. It explains some stuff that happened in episode 1 in a way that's like, oh, interesting. Like, I guess I'm not quite sure if I want to say it or not, because I think that was kind of an interesting twist on the first episode from the second episode's perspective. So, definitely interested and curious where that one's going to go. But episode 2 it felt a little bit slower, probably because it was less introducing this entirely new world and this entirely new rules, and more about progressing the story to moving towards episode 3. With episode 3 being basically the entrance exam for the academy, and that being the thing. I'm curious what's going to happen there. I think some of the stuff they've set up for that, there's interesting potential. I want to see how the characters all react. So I'm looking forward to episode 3 of that. Saving 80,000 gold in another world for my retirement, episode 2. Actually, I would say it did a lot of things to fix issues with episode 1. And not like retconning and stuff like that. So like, there's still one big issue with that first episode in terms of how our main character travels to the other world and this is all happening. Insofar as that one element seems to be completely whimsical, but it doesn't. It's hard to tell, because if it's just a completely whimsical anime, then that changes the tone a whole lot. But episode 2 kind of makes sure we know it's not going to do that. I would have actually guessed that our main character was actually a middle school or a high school girl, based on the way she dressed. You know, it seems like a stereotypical way that they dress those characters. But they actually established that she's an adult, and I'm guessing that's just her way of dressing cutesy, which is perfectly fine. And episode 2 really takes the exploring of her Isekai cheat powers in a direction that's actually very different from where I would have guessed and what I was expecting, in a way that's like, okay, she feels like she is less being led around, and like she's the one doing some interesting planning and preparation, and I actually want to see where she's going to go with all this. So episode 2 did a really good job of making me say, okay, well, episode 1 was maybe on the okay side, and episode 2 is like, oh yeah, definitely good to great. Episode 3, you know, it could easily go back down from there, but again, good job, episode 2, picking up steam. Handyman Saito in Another World. Yeah, I guess I just continued to do some stuff, and it's neat to digest, including the thing where they were cooking food, and that food would probably digest well. I feel like they established something kind of overarching story-wise in the second episode. Like the first episode would have established, oh yes, he didn't feel fulfilled in his own world, he feels fulfilled here. Maybe they actually started something, but they never actually did it. And maybe this means that every episode is going to touch ever so slightly on that core. But for the most part, if there's any problem with this series, it's that we learn more about it, but I'm not sure if there's a goal. So it could very easily lose attention if the kind of stuff it ends up exploring aren't interesting enough. Not necessarily bad, but definitely means that if you're looking for a story, so far it's not the kind of anime for that. But nice otherwise. By the grace of the gods, Season 2, Episode 2. My biggest problem here was that I felt like Season 2, Episode 1 established what Season 2 was supposed to be about, and Season 2, Episode 2 spent a lot of its time not seeming to do that. I mean, I guess it's preparing to start to do that, but then it's kind of weird to start your second season I suppose. And I don't know. Beyond that, I think if you've enjoyed By the Grace of the Gods Season 1, you probably enjoy Season 2 up to this point too. The Misfit of Demon King Academy. So, I don't remember exactly what all I said. I mentioned Season 2, Episode 1, going into it, wondering, wait, what are our characters going to do again? I felt like Season 1 ended in a place where it wasn't obvious what major piece of confrontation would happen next, and Season 2, Episode 1 very suddenly introduced a whole lot of stuff happening all at once, and Season 2, Episode 2, I kind of felt like resolved a whole lot of that in a pretty fine ways, although it kind of made the Episode 1 setting up of all this stuff as kind of over the top, and I'm not quite sure if I'm what I'm expecting from the remainder of the season. But, okay, Episode 2, I suppose. Reborn to Master the Blade, from Hero King to Extraordinary Squire, Episode 2. So, one of the things I was worried about going into the second episode is that, like I said, the first episode left me with a strong impression because there was an actual neat battle that happened in there, and I'm like, okay, I'm actually curious and interested in what our main character is, but our main character is trying to keep a relatively low profile, so to speak. And so it's like, well, you kind of got to be careful with some of that stuff, because the direction Episode 2 was going here made it look like, are we really going to get to see this character, who's definitely the most awesome character in this show, do awesome things? And I was worried that, you have a lot of action in the very first episode, then maybe you don't get to have quite as much good action going forward. Even if it was a little thing, relatively speaking, in the first episode, we still want to see some of that cool stuff, and if that's what this show had to offer, it would have been kind of easy for it to disappoint. But I felt like Episode 2, while it started out feeling kind of, I'm a bit worried about if this show's going to continue giving us this character doing awesome stuff. And I'd say it ends at a place where it's like, okay, yeah, I'm still interested to see what this character is going to do. So, maybe a tiny bit of shakiness there, but an okay Episode 2 for continuing forward and wanting to see more of this show. But still not entirely sure what kind of show it's going to be long term, because presumably at some point, it establishes a status quo or something like that, and I still don't know what that would look like. But oh well. Campfire cooking in another world with my absurd skills. So, this was one I was actually a little reluctant to start, mostly because, an isekai show that's about showing off food, and that's really all it does, is interesting, and I like watching them, and I like looking at the food. Even though half the foods are things I don't eat, I kind of appreciate them. It's a bit like scratching that itch that caused you to want to watch cooking shows. Even though I was just trying to think if I had any on YouTube that I watch. Well, not shows, but like channels or cooking videos. But, not there. So, that's a very common thing, and we have a couple restaurants from another world where people from these isekai come to the restaurant to eat Japanese food, and they're okay. And if this was just another, okay, well, this guy is just going to be cooking food, and every episode is going to be about us seeing him cook food for these isekai people. Well, it's not that that would be bad, but would I want to come to that week by week? Maybe. But with some of this other stuff having some potentially good story stuff going on, I was a little hesitant. So, but I'm happy to say, watching it, that so far the first episode does a really good job of blending those the way they should be blended. As in, like, I got to the end of the first episode, and it felt like it was telling a story through the whole there, and I'm curious where the story continues. And a lot of that had to do with our main character cooking. So it's not just we're going to have these characters that are happily eating food, just happily eating food. There may be more to it than that. And I'm definitely very interested in seeing that. So, good job on the first episode there. Another first episode, and I know second episode is out now, The Tale of Outcasts. And I'm not sure what I think of that one. It seemed like a good setup. It's just a question of, do I feel like continuing to watch it. Because I'm not quite sure. Our main characters are neat enough, I suppose, and there's some interesting conflict setup. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. Which means I might try to give episode 2 a watch. We'll just have to see how I feel as the week continues going on. Next up comes Farming Life in Another World, episode 2. They introduced something that absolutely needed to be introduced in this episode, although it took longer into the episode than I would have thought needed. So the main problem with the first episode, and this isn't like they shouldn't have done this problem. This is, when you watch the first episode, the main problem is our main character doesn't really have anybody to communicate with. And when they showed him discovering all these awesome and neat things, and part of what makes having an overpowered character in another world interesting is having other people react to these overpowered powers, like the character situation, their interaction with them, their interaction between, a lot of that tends to be something that draws a lot of people in. And Farming Life in Another World did establish some really interesting beginning stuff, but nobody to really react to it or interact with him to kind of give us a straight man to his wild, I guess. I don't know. And episode 2 did finally give us that. I mean, the preview for the stinger of the first episode suggested it would happen. I'm not sure if it's 100% the best introduction ever, but it's okay, at least. If I were to say there's any problem there, it would be like, from a perspective of, okay, these characters met. If that person he didn't know was actually dangerous, then he probably would have just been attacked in probably the dumbest way ever. As it is, they try to establish a different kind of relationship, which is okay. But otherwise, I think it's a good start. So the series is a little bit slow, but it's providing better stuff than I would have said the other farming one was, because this one actually involves a lot of farming, and a magical, mystical kind of farming, but seeing our character going along. So he's village building, it seems like, and so far, I actually appreciate that about it, and I'm really liking it. And of the 3 episodes off of the 3 series off of High Dive that I'm watching right now, that's the one I'm looking forward to seeing new episodes the most. Next up, we have Giant Beasts of Ours, episode 2, and it's hard to say what I think or feel. I feel like it's continuing to be a pretty good to great show. The characters continue to be fun. I think the cat girl hanging off the ceiling was kind of amusing. And if you don't know what I mean, then watch it and you'll be like, huh. That's actually portrayed pretty hilariously. But let's see. Yeah, it's cool and neat. I'm not sure what to think about it otherwise. I guess I'm waiting to see what it's doing, because this feels like something that could have some sort of satisfying story, overarching story to it. And I do think we have sources of conflict, and we have vague ideas of goals, so it's at least aimed in the right direction, and the execution on both of these episodes has been, these are pretty good. But I don't know what to think of beyond that, so I'm still waiting to see more. And then, last, but I say not least, but the truth of the matter, so there's Endo and Kobayashi Live, the latest on Tsundere villain as Liselotte, episode 2. So I watched that just before I started recording this stuff, so that one's freshest on my mind. And it's okay, but all these other things I was talking about, how other series are doing a good job of setting up goals and conflict. So there's kind of goals here, but I feel like it continues to deliberately avoid conflict. So it's mostly just a playing around with an interesting idea, but I'm not feeling very energized to continue, because I didn't quite know, are they going to set up conflict that this playing around that they've done with it's going to do. And it's not quite. It's more just a kind of happy. That's not an exact way to describe it, but it feels like a happy. Oh, they're giving the main character, the prince character, enough information in order for things to not seem like as bad as they actually are. Or something like that. Actually, the main problem is it doesn't even seem to be entirely doing that. It just did that a little bit. So for the most part, I'm not quite sure that I feel like this show's grabbing me. So there's a very real chance that I'm not going to continue with episode 3. And this isn't to say that it's bad, but again, it's just not grabbing me. And, unfortunately, since everything else has gotten fine enough episodes for me to be interested in what's going to continue happening in those, that means that there's a couple other first episodes for a couple other series that I may end up watching, and so this list may end up getting a little bit longer. Oh well, this video's already longer. For everything else, the Cinderace raid came and went again over this weekend. I didn't do anything spectacular, but I did spend some of my open time just, keeping up on raids. I'm not sure if I entirely need to do that. I guess, let's see. The next 7-star raid is confirmed to be Greninja. And there's a lot of problems with that announcement. There's 2 potential abilities that would be really awesome abilities for it to have. It's most likely going to be its hidden ability. But unfortunately, we can't discount the possibility that it's going to include Battle Bond, the secret ability. Now, there's a very good argument for why it probably won't include Battle Bond, or won't include Battle Bond, including data mining confirming that a Battle Bond Greninja won't be able to breed. So then how are you going to get anybody your Froakies and whatnot? So, yeah, I agree that it's probably not going to be Battle Bond, but we can't say for certain. It's probably going to be one or the other. But the other main problem is we don't have any idea of what kind of loadout it's going to be. We already know that, so every time a 7-star has been released, both times there's also been a pair of 4 and 5 stars. And in theory, the ones with the ideal typing, those are the ones that Game Freak thinks are good Pokemon to train up for taking on this Raidmon. Which is absolute bull fucking shit, because Gengar is no good against Cinderace. But, I guess their thought was, oh, well, he's at least immune to his main attack and maybe resisted another. No, but the problem is Cinderace simply hit way too fucking hard. Even if you use both Gyarados and Gengar together, that Gengar is going down. Sorry. No can do. So, you put that aside. With Greninja, they're giving us Lucario and I forget the name of that bell Pokemon. The Steel Psychic. And I did see a good point that if Game Freak considers those good candidates to consider for countering Greninja, then that kind of suggests that Greninja might not run a Dark ability, even though Dark is one of Greninja's original types, just because then that would be super effective against Bronzong. There we go. Finally remembered its name. And that's a good point. And other people point out that Game Freak hasn't exactly been choosing mons that are actually good against them, against the raid mons, Gengar being the example right there. So, yeah. We don't know. We don't know if it's going to prioritize physical attacks, if it's going to prioritize special attacks. Maybe this will be the first 7-star with a mix. I mean, it would be the third, so it's very possible. People suspect that since the previous 7-stars focused on, proteins for physical stuff, and then the one before that, Charizard was calcium, I think it is, for... calcium does not sound right. That sounds like special defense or something. But yeah, I was focusing on the special defense vitamin. So people are thinking that, Greninja's probably going to focus on a different stat. Speed seems like a good choice just because Greninja has a lot of speed. But yeah, we don't know if it's going to be all physical, all special, a mix. If there's anything we can use to kind of guess, having a poison terror typing, obviously if it has the terror attack, I forget if that's its name. I forget what its name is. But if it has that, that will be a poison type attack over whichever stat it's actually using the most. Fine. Good enough. But if it actually does bring a poison type, there's only one it learns, and that's Gunk Shot. So that would make it physical. Or more likely to lean physical. Which could mean that it brings Swords Dance. But other people have also pointed out that, kind of thematically appropriate for Greninja, what if it brings Double Team and Smokescreen? So nobody really quite knows what to do because Greninja could run physical or special. Its special attack is slightly higher than its physical, but it learns Swords Dance, which makes its physical more effective than its specials. Its signature move, Water Shuriken, is special, so does that mean it's going to run special? But again, Gunk Shot is physical, so does that mean it's going to run physical? I don't think any of us know. There's a part of me that's actually slightly hoping that it does this double team Smokescreen bullshit, and I don't think I can understate how much bullshit that would actually be. But if it does run those, that requires people to kind of train up raid mons with a completely different line of thinking than anything else we've had to train up until now. But on the other hand, that would actually be pretty mean. And Game Freak at least tries not to be mean, even though that Screaming Rabbit is a thing of nightmares now. But it felt like through most of the weekend I wasn't able to do a whole lot. So maybe part of it was also that I finally got a turbo controller that allowed me to run the Academy Ace tournament overnight reliably. And I was playing around with that for a couple of days, but it feels like I haven't had much of a chance to go hunting for Pokemon that I've wanted to train up. I'm trying to look for shiny versions of some Pokemon that are kind of hard to find shiny. Maybe that's not the entirely 100% accurate way to say it, but it's close enough that okay, for any of you that know the routine, it means I'm saving the game at a certain spot, making a sandwich, shiny hunting. If I don't get what I need to get, then I'm resetting so I don't lose my Urban Mysticas. It's taking a while to do. But, Pokemon, it's still fun. Although at this point I'm definitely... I'm wondering if something else is going to get played. Yeah, maybe not much to comment about. So, there we go. That's everything. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I should start uploading and processing it now. So, y'all, have a nice week.